This is a demonstration of a horizontal scrolling animation that's continuous and looping, with horizontal parallax introduced by scaling the different looping layers in After Effects. Now if you look at the layers down here, you see that the only things I'm animating in this composition are the hero, the head, its shadow, and this star that comes in and disappears. All of the scrolling and the parallax is happening in these three compositions here. It's actually one composition, just repeated 3 times because it's a 3-second loop, and I use it 3 times to have a 9-second animation with all that stuff scrolling. Now I can get away with this because the hero and the shadow never cross behind anything that's scrolling by, so they can just be on the top. Now if I want to make it a little more complicated, and some people do, I try to keep things simple, but then sometimes you have to complicate things a little bit. I'm going to introduce some more foreground elements that the hero goes behind, and I still want the horizontal scrolling and the horizontal parallax. So I'm going to have a background scrolling composition and a foreground scrolling composition, so I can animate the hero in between the foreground and the background. Now there are different ways of doing that. I'm going to introduce like a tree in the foreground and a tree in the background. And as they scroll, of course, a new tree is going to have to come on when the first one scrolls off. Same with the foreground and background. And there are a couple of approaches to that. The easiest thing, I suppose, would be to do it exactly the same way we did the other layers. In Photoshop, create a seamlessly tiled layer that's twice the width of the screen. That's what all these other layers are, and animate them the same way. So for instance, like here, you see the background is twice the screen width, and it's seamless, loops perfectly. So I could do that in Photoshop, but sometimes you want to add things in After Effects, and the trees are freestanding. They don't go edge to edge like the grass and the background images do. So you could just plop them in there, but then you have to be careful about the spacing. And I'll try to quickly just talk about both approaches to that. In Photoshop, I went and painted a tree, and here it is, more or less centered on the screen. And that would be very easy to duplicate. But if I wanted to position the tree more like this, where it's going off the edge, well, obviously then there has to be part of the tree coming in from the other side. So the way we were doing that, I have the tree centered on the screen, it's not touching the edges. If I go into Filter, Other, and Offset, I can pick a placement. So here, it's on the left side of the screen, it's going off screen, and so we have what we want. We have a second tree coming in from the right as it goes off the left. So that's the image. To get the whole thing, I'm just going to duplicate that layer. Then I'm going to make the canvas twice as wide. And I'll just do that relatively. I'll just go 100% wider. There it is. And now I'm going to move one of these copies. Here, let me zoom to fit here. And move one of these 2 layers over to the right. So I have the Move tool. Do Command T. I'm going to do a relative move here. So I'm going to use the delta, type in So this is working in pixels. So I want to move it 720 pixels to the right. Click OK. And here we have our seamlessly tiled layer. All I have to do is merge these two together, save that, bring it into After Effects, and I can just move this like any of the other layers. It's going to start seeing the left side and then animate the right side onto the screen. And that would work just like all the other layers. Now, you can do that, but sometimes you'll just want to plop something in there. So I'm going to go ahead, and I think I already brought in a tree. I'm going to show how to do that. So first I want to get the composition I want here. So I'm just going to drop the tree in here, and it's in front of everything. And I did not make this big enough, so I'm going to scale it so it doesn't obscure everything behind it. Unfortunately, this doesn't have the extra resolution I would like. Guess I'm going to make it even bigger. So that you can still see the obstacles here and there. So because this is low resolution anyway, and I'm scaling it up, it'll look cleaner than this when it's rendered, but it'll be kind of soft, but we'll just consider that to be depth of field. And okay, so I'm going to leave that like that. And I'm going to be positioning it behind the nearest grass and in front of the mid-depth grass. And so I'm going to put another one of these in the background. And I might actually scale this one down. And it'll be over here, and it'll be behind the other things, but for the moment I'll just kind of put it behind the other tree anyway. And it'll be somewhere, somewhere like that. But it'll be obscured by these other things. Okay, so this is kind of the scene I want. The obstacles are going to be, going by. This guy's going to be flying around, and he will be in front of the tree. So I'm going to go ahead and position the tree back there. So the hero will be going behind this tree, and of course they'll be scrolling across, and then at the end they'll be flying up into the sky. All right, so now I need to get the horizontal parallax and the proper depth going here. So again, all of that is happening in these pre-compositions here. So I'm going to have to kind of break that apart into like a foreground scroller and a background scroller. So I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these. Here's the pre-comp. There's actually only one pre-comp 1 composition, but it shows up 3 times. And I'm just going to copy, well, select all. I'm going to copy all of these out here. I'm going to make sure that I'm on frame 0 and paste. So now I've got these elements here. Oh, one of the trees is behind, but let's see, I'm going to have this tree behind the near grass and in front of the rain. And then there's the mid grass. Okay, so the other tree I'm going to put in front of the background, but behind the moving obstacles. So the foreground is going to have the near grass, the tree, and the rain. Everything else can be in the background. So I'm going to pre-compose this. Pre-compose, and I'm going to call this a near scroller. Move all attributes in the composition. That shouldn't make any difference with this one. Okay, now if I open that, see I have 3 seconds of this stuff. Okay, so to get this animating the way I want, remember there has to be another tree coming on. So, and the tree has to be animated, and then we'll scale this properly. But notice these other things are compositions. I'm going to turn this into a composition as well. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-compose the tree. There's going to be another tree, so I'll call this front tree. All attributes into the composition. Okay, so now I have this composition, which is the grass and some atmospheric stuff at the top, the tree, and the rain. If I open up the tree, here we have the actual tree graphic. So to get the animation happening in here, this is it. All of these compositions were 3 seconds long, so I see that I have to actually adjust this. Alright, so as you recall, the screen is 720 pixels wide, so that's the distance the tree has to move in 3 seconds. So I'm going to make a copy of the tree, Control D, and I'm going to show the position of both of these. And you see this is the current XY position. I don't need to change Y at all. Let's put this one at 270, just a more even number. And so the other tree, which is right on top of it, needs to be 720 pixels farther to the right. So that's going to be 990. Now that should be fine. Okay, so you see a little bit of the brightness of the leaves shining here. Right, so let's take a look at the animation. This is where I want it to start and end. So I'm going to turn on, select all, turn on animation here. So I created keyframes at this point in time. So 3 seconds later, I want everything to have moved to the left by 720 pixels. They're both selected. Select the X value, type in plus, telling them that I want to offset that value by a negative 720. So it's plus a negative 720. And you see everything scrolling across. Now notice here, it doesn't match. If I go from one keyframe to the next, these frames don't match because I'm going to need another tree coming in from the side to get it to all loop perfectly. So again, going back to the beginning, I'm going to duplicate the second one. I duplicated both of them. Alright, don't need that. So I'm going to delete one of the ones at 270, and then the one at 990, I am again going to plus 720. So now there are 3 trees. And I have to animate the third one properly. So we have a lot of information on the screen here now. If you look at where they start, this position here is where I want the third one to end up. So if I go to the last keyframe, I can put in the 990, and it pops right in. Now if I play this, it should almost be right. On the very last frame, as it loops, there's a slight hesitation because these keyframes here, the position is the same as these, so this frame is duplicated. I have to nudge this over one frame, so now it should loop perfectly. Okay, so that's the animation for the foreground tree. It's working perfectly. So let's take a look at that in the near scroller composition. And here we see the grass in front, the front tree, and the rain. And this should be a 3-second composition as well. It took the length of my overall composition when I created this. Okay, so here you see the grass in front is moving faster than the tree, but more than we want, actually. If you look at the near grass, I have it scaled 110, the rain 105. If I want the tree moving about more the same speed as the rain, I would change the scaling of that. And now the grass in the foreground is moving just a little bit faster than the tree. And I'm going to have to expand the range a little bit here. The near stuff at 112, then we can go like 108, and then the rain and the mid stuff can be, we'll do 104. Keep everything a scale of 4 separated from each other. Okay, let's check the animation here. So I've scaled these. The change is the relative speed horizontally, but it still all loops perfectly. Go back to my main composition. So now I have the near scroller. Now I have to take the midgrass, the obstacle, the tree, and the background, pre-compose those, open up the rear scroller, okay, if I select all these and look at the scaling, you see the background is not scaled at all. Now the tree I scaled to make it the right size, but we won't see that here once we make a composition out of it. So it'd be 100, 105, 105. Deselect before changing them all. So make that 104, make that 104. Now the same thing we did before. I'm going to select the tree, pre-compose it, rear tree, open up the rear tree composition, duplicate that. Now because it's just up to the edge, I don't think we'll need 3 of them. We'll see. Select all, show the positions, the second tree plus 720. Okay, let's add the animation. They're both selected, frame 0, turn on keyframing. Then 3 seconds later we want everything to move 720 to the left, so that's negative 720. Select the X, type in plus, telling it I want to increment by a negative 720 pixels, and I saw no change. It looks like there is a tiny, like one leaf coming in there. Although if we animate this, I don't think we'll notice that one leaf because it's ready to disappear anyway. All I have to do is take these keyframes, shift them over one, just double check. And that should be fine. Now we go back into the composition with the rear scroller, and we just have to have the right scaling applied here. Well, just do like 102, so it's just a tiny bit in front of the background. Yeah, there are too many different layers too close together here. But we get a 2% difference between these anyway. When we play it, the trees should be moving a little bit faster than the background behind it. Almost imperceptible. But then the obstacles are moving a little bit faster than the tree. And the grass is moving the same as the obstacles. So now, when we go back to our main composition, I can get rid of these original pre-comps here. I can drag the rear scroller to the bottom, the near scroller to the top. Everything else should be in between somewhere. I just have to make this repeat 3 times. So I'm going to duplicate it, select them all, use the animation assistant, keyframe assistant to sequence them with no overlap. Do the same thing here. Now to clean it up, of course, I could take these 3 repeating layers and pre-compose those so that it's just like one item on this timeline. Alright, let's see where we are. So our hero is moving behind these trees, over and under the obstacles, and off into the foliage. Now, with the layer with the rear tree, I would probably put something in there on the ground plane, so it's not floating there so much.